I'm going to tell you a story that not only involves me, it practically involves my entire family, and where there were even several deaths that perhaps could have been linked to this terrifying issue that to this day keeps me more than surprised. Before I begin, I want to make it clear that in my family, we have always been very believers in God. And we never imagined that something bad could happen to us, and even less in such an unpredictable way. Maybe everything started when I was 5 years old. I don't remember much from those years, but what I do know is that at that time, my older brother, who was then 15 years old, started dating a girl from the neighborhood. This girl was, interestingly, the daughter of the church pastor. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, time passed and they are still together to this day. They still are. But what I'm going to tell you involves them, or rather it involves her. And while I can't guarantee anything, there's something very intense inside me that screams that something bad, very bad, is close to this woman.
I just wanted to tell you that since this girl got into our family, we went from tragedy to tragedy. I'm not saying she's to blame for everything, but I always remember a before and an after. When this girl came into our home, the years kept passing by. Strange events started happening in our house where we lived when I was a girl in a neighborhood of Mar del Plata, in which all sorts of things happened.
Something that was always discussed in many of our family talks. It was precisely when these events began. It was about the black soil that appeared under the beds. At first, my family thought it was because of ants, something very common often, but not because it was moist, totally black soil that literally appeared in little heaps, in different areas of the bedrooms, mainly under the beds, and it was something very different from what an insect can normally leave. Another issue that had started to worry my parents mainly was that at night my sister would wake up screaming, because an entirely invisible force would shake her bed, move it from place to place, and even lift it a few inches into the air with her on top. My sister couldn't sleep and was going through a horrible time in her life because she felt in danger, watched, stalked all the time. But no one had the slightest idea of what was going on, because everything started from one day to the next. Perhaps this worsened and became even more complicated when one early morning my mom heard a noise, and when she went to my sister's bedroom, she found her sitting on the bed, talking to herself, or better said, with someone who wasn't visible to the naked eye. You couldn't understand what she was saying because she was practically whispering all the words. When my old lady approached, she realized that she was either sleepwalking or going through some kind of trance. She had never experienced this before. I want to emphasize that. He sat with her, and at that very moment she gets up, goes back to bed, and continues sleeping. But in the morning, my old lady tells her about this, and she confessed that she had been having horrible dreams all night. But specifically, she remembered that at one point she woke up, got up, and sitting on the bed, started talking to a black woman as if she was someone African. This woman, whom she didn't know, told her in a few words that she had to take her own life. When my mom heard this, you can imagine that she became extremely desperate because she also didn't know what to do in such a case. I should clarify that we were praying every day, every night, but it seemed that God, at least those days, was not present in our house. We felt abandoned.
By this time we were already teenagers, but many things always kept happening to us. But I'm summarizing it. My sister wants to commit suicide. A lot of things start happening, and my sister-in-law was already living with us. They were still living in our house, and they were already in their 20s with my brother. They had already had children, everything.
At that time, we sought help from the church. My mom spoke with the pastor, and it was after going home he told us that it was more than evident that there was a great damage, not only in the house. The family had something bad on them, and that the work was so big that it would take a lot of time to eliminate it. We did everything he told us to do, but far from improving, things got worse. The relationships in the family wore down to a point where my parents separated. The financial problems caused us to lose the house. And something terrible that also happened at that time is that my sister-in-law's sister died in a terrible accident. When we lost the house, We had to move, and we thought that maybe it would be a new beginning, and that misfortune that pursued us would stay where it all began. But no, because in that new place, everything continued, and in the worst way. In this new house, sleep paralysis made its presence known. And in a terrifying way, because everyone in the family suffered from it constantly, everyone except my sister-in-law. By that time, I had gotten into a relationship and was constantly thinking about getting out of there. In being able to improve, to move forward, to progress, and once and for all, to be able to get out of that pit where we all were.
I always noticed something dark in my sister-in-law. No one could convince me otherwise. I always felt that she had something to do with everything. I don't know why, but it's something that still sticks with me to this day. Why do I say this? Because I remember when I invited her to my house when I was already living together. I have a little boy, and then everything started happening in my house. The same things that happened in our house when we all saw each other together. Then I separate myself from a lot of things. My mom comes from Mar del Plata to live here because she meets a man, obviously all grown up, and she learns a name, and she gets married here in Pehuajó. Well, she came to live here in Buenos Aires, Pehuajó. I separate. I stayed living in Mar del Plata for a while. I no longer visited my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law stays living in the house where we all lived, in another house we had. I always had suspicions about her, which I shared with my mom. However, my mom would dismiss my concerns, telling me I was crazy.
About a year ago, my old lady passes away. And why do I tell this? Because I don't think it was just a whim of fate. My old lady has always been a studious person, talking about matters of religion, I say, and precisely with my sister-in-law. They talked a lot about different topics related to the rather dark side, about the different branches that exist of magic, occultism, and topics that work with energies, among other things. In fact, my old lady always said that she had the ability to perform astral travels, something that took them a lot of time to achieve. And she was proud of this. On one occasion, this girl, my sister-in-law, sent my old lady a gift. It was a kind of Bible or very particular book about occultism, accompanied by a rag doll that they had previously talked about. I begged her not to accept it, not to accept anything, because there was something bad behind all of this. But my old lady didn't pay me any attention, and of course she kept all her gifts very happily. And shortly after, some more serious things began to happen that added to the usual. One afternoon, my 10-year-old son at that time comes running into the kitchen screaming and very scared. When I asked him what had happened, he tells me that he went into Grandma's room, that is my mom, and found her sleeping. But there was a man dressed all in black and a hat standing in the middle of the room looking at her completely still. I, of course, ran there, but there was absolutely no one. From that very day, and I'm not exaggerating at all, the house was filled with spiders, toads everywhere, beetles and other insects, but in quantities that I had never seen in my life. And the strange thing was that it wasn't because of the weather, as often happens. And when trying to eradicate them, kill them, they would reappear almost in the same quantities. It was something amazing and also terrifying. The sleep paralysis never went away, but now they were more complex. Because when you opened your eyes, you always found dark figures in the room. And they gave off a tremendous evil. Days later, my old lady started to feel sick. We went to the doctor and she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Unfortunately, there was nothing more to do, simply wait for death to come in a short time.
Our world came crashing down. After notifying my brothers and everyone, she never came. They all started traveling to see my mom. She never wanted to come. I felt her as very fake. I didn't want anything from her. And while we were here, my mom was getting worse and worse. I won't elaborate since we all know what cancer is. But I know very well that people who practice evil can harm you. I know there are many who say it's not like that, but I know it is. Many who can harm you and make you fall into an illness by doing evil to you. She gets sick and my sister comes, she stays with me here at my mom's house, taking care of her all the time, you know? We visited shortly before my mom's death. The house was badly infested with lazy flies. It was a thing that was full of lazy flies. We couldn't eat, it was full. We didn't understand what was happening.
And not only that, Again, in addition to the flies, we began to hear the croaking of a toad. It wasn't a similar noise, it was that of a toad. Do you know where it was coming from? From my mom's mouth. It could be due to gases that accumulated in the stomach, I guess. It's perfectly possible. But it was for long minutes where this noise was heard exactly as a frog does, with time between each of the songs. It was something terrible that we both heard and left us speechless.
And then things would appear on the sidewalk in front of my mom's house. One time the head of a goose appeared, didn't it? A rooster, a goose, a severed black head with a piece of a can with a liquid. Things would appear on the sidewalk in front of my mom's house. One day then my mom trying to talk to me, she asked me, "Daughter, is someone doing something to me?" She told me, but I already knew my mom was very ill. I didn't want to tell her, I couldn't. And I told her, "Well, Mom, we have to ask God," I told her. But I didn't even have the desire or strength to ask God because what we were going through was terrible.
At that time, my sister came to get her and took her to Mendoza simply for a change of scenery. The doctors gave the okay, so we all went there, and my mom's last days were precisely in that beautiful province. One detail that happened in those days before her death was that my sister's dog would stand near my mom. She would look right at her side in a corner where there was nothing, and she wouldn't stop growling and barking. We always kept thinking about this, and it was more than evident that the animal could see something next to my mom, something that we couldn't. And I can assure you that it was something bad.
When my mom leaves, I find out from my cousins who live next to my sister-in-law's house that my sister-in-law, a day before my mom left, she, who was a pastor's daughter and we were all Christians, had set up the shrine of Saint Death and the shrine of Gauchito Gil, and they told me that she made my nephews kneel and pray to Saint Death. Despite many skeptics who claim that Saint Death and Gauchito Gil have no impact, I believe they do. Yes, I know it is. It's used for evil. Because my sister-in-law was very dark, so she revealed herself, took off the mask, and then my nephew told me that he found her laughing, but badly at my sister-in-law about everything that had happened to my mom. And when my mom passed away asking for a ring that she had given her, it had been about 3 years that she wanted that ring. I investigated thoroughly to see if something could be done behind a ring and discovered many things. It's an unshakable conviction of mine. I haven't spoken to her since that day because of all this. And well, everything remained like that. And the last thing I found out was that my brother told me he found her. A paper where there was a prayer for all of us, where she put us. That we do badly, that we get sick, that we don't have jobs, everything. And she would do all of that like a scroll and put it inside a jar with a liquid. Many things. And I end up saying that when one of my nephews started dating a girl she didn't want, I don't know what happened. The girl, she told me that she suspected her, she made her meals, the girl got sick, she got everything like a rot in her stomach and she dies. The girl was 19 years old. And my nephew's mom, who was my brother's wife, and my brother had been her sister's boyfriend, also got sick. She got terminal cancer in her stomach and passed away. That's why I said we were a very tragic family, but I always felt she had something to do with everything. I'm not saying she has the strength of Satan to want to control death, because the only one who gives and takes life is God. But that she has something, no one ever got that out of my head again.
What I've told you is very summarized. Years and years of misfortunes and terrifying situations that my family and I have lived through. Every little thing that we felt, that we heard, that we saw. The sleep paralysis and the deaths, of course, always had a common thread. My sister-in-law, who was close in one way or another.
A week before my dad breaks down, they were no longer together, right? A week before my dad breaks down, they take him to the hospital and everything was already taken. So my dad passes away a week before. A week later, my mom dies. Years ago, when my sister-in-law invited us over to her house, she served us cake and other foods. One day my nephew tells me, "Aunt, don't eat anymore," he tells me, because my mom tells me. She brings the food from the rituals, he says. What do the others do? She brings all that, he says, and feeds it to them. All that is offered, she said. Didn't I pay attention to my nephew? Nowadays I keep thinking and I think about everything. The last thing I wanted to tell you to add was that When my mom passed away, my siblings wanted the body to be taken to Mar del Plata, and we didn't want that. Because we didn't want my sister-in-law to be at the wake or go to the cemetery to do anything strange afterwards. So we decided to cremate her, and we took the ashes to Mar del Plata, but we took them to a place that was a field. We went to a field where no one could discover that it was going to be there, and to a tree that was a dry tree. A place where we didn't know that no one was ever going to go there or anything, so we put my mom's ashes in that tree. And by coincidence, when my sister and I met again, a year had passed, we met, I traveled to Mar del Plata, we went to that place, we found that the tree was all in bloom, it had filled up with a vine, bad everything, full of green leaves, everything. We stayed there looking with the car in front of the tree, and we started to drink mate, and my mom, if there was something she always loved, it was hummingbirds, the hummingbird, the little bird of those, we call them hummingbirds. It filled up. We were sitting drinking mud, and suddenly from the vine of the tree they started to come out, but easily, like 10, flying around the tree. And we became happy. It was like we smiled because we felt that it was like something, I don't know how, that she is at peace, she is calm. And we couldn't believe that that dry tree that was all ready to start the fires was all green, full of vine. And on top of that, all with these hummingbirds, full, which was the bird that she liked.